uncontrollable desire to move their legs. Doctors don't know why it happens, but they say it gets worse at night.
It's horrible. I don't even know what it's like to sleep 8 hours.
Psychological factors can also keep you up at night. You can try to treat yourself with one of the numerous sleep aids on the market, but sometimes you need professional help.
If your nighttime sleeping affects daytime function, that's the time to call the doctor.
And help is available. Over the last decade, doctors have done lots of research on sleep disorders and the ways to treat them. What they've learned can probably help you get a good night's sleep. This is
Welcome back. Welcome back to you. We were, just prior to the break, talking about sleep apnea, which was mentioned here in our clip. Let's go to the next question in our survey. Okay. All right, let's take a look at our next question. Do you snore loudly or pause in breathing at night? Which seems like a good place to begin, since it's where we left off. Can you tell us, you were saying with sleep apnea, during the night we forget to breathe or we stop breathing, or explain that a little more to us.
It's simple physics. Our throats are just like a straw. And if you ever think of how something's created or designed or built, they're areas of vulnerability. And our necks and our throats are areas of vulnerability in our body. The throat specifically has to have 3 different functions that are in conflict. It has to be able to maintain itself rigid in order to sustain itself open while the lungs are sucking in the air. It's got to stay open.
Okay.
But at the same time, when you eat, you have to have something that's strong enough to propel the food down and close.
Okay.
And when you talk, if something has to be sensitive enough to control the flow of the sounds and our tone of our voice.
Okay.
So the throat is doing different things that are in conflict. At times it's got to stay open, sometimes it's got to stay closed. Okay. And when you're sleeping, the control of your throat is different than the control of your throat when you're awake, because you don't really need to be talking or eating in your sleep, although some people do.
Okay.
So what happens in sleep apnea is that your throat is kept open by a group of dilating muscles. And the natural tendency is for these muscles to relax as you go to sleep. So the throat slowly gets smaller. The smaller your throat gets, the harder it is to suck in the air. So your diaphragm has to create greater negative force to suck in the air into the lungs. And what happens is you go into a vicious cycle where the deeper into sleep you get, the more the throat muscles relax. The more the throat muscles relax, the harder the diaphragm pulls. And you reach a point where the diaphragm pulls in so hard, the whole diaphragm closes on itself.
Okay.
Before it closes, when it starts getting narrow, when the diaphragm is pulling, the air is rushing in, making the tissue around it rattle and vibrate, and that's why people snore.
Oh, okay.
So they go through this, if I can demonstrate, they go,
yeah.
and that's the pattern. And that's called obstructive sleep apnea syndrome. Apnea is just a Greek word which means lack of air.
Okay. So, I mean, with snoring, I thought that the reason people woke themselves up snoring is because it was loud.
People who have obstructive sleep apnea syndrome can have some hearing loss.
Okay.
But most of them don't. The reason you wake up is because you're not breathing.
Okay.
And it's just an alarm.
Okay.
So one of the first things that happens is when you stop breathing, there's less oxygen available to your lungs and to your brain.
Okay.
Your brain senses that you're not breathing and sends a signal to go from a deeper sleep to a lighter sleep, or to jerk you up or wake completely.
Okay.
And think of it a little bit like if you ever had a manual transmission car. There are stages to our sleep and different cycles that the brain goes through. If you're trying to go into your deeper sleep and you suddenly can't go further down, you're trying to get into rapid eye movement sleep because you're not breathing, the brain jerks you up and makes you awake again. Right. You got to start again at stage 1. Just look in your car stalls. You have to go back to first gear. Okay. Before you're trying to get into overdrive. You have to always start again at stage 1.
Now, if you're sleeping alone, how would you know you're doing that?
You don't.
You don't. Okay, so
might not.
The reason that you would know something was wrong is because you were fatigued in the morning after morning, and even though you were going to bed on time, you were still waking up
The
tired.
first thing to think about is, over time, do you now need more sleep to feel refreshed? Or over time, the amount, people often think that they can get by with a minimum amount of sleep. Let's say, oh, when I was in college, I can get by with 5.5 hours, let's say. Now they can no longer do that. Well, in reality, the amount of sleep the body needs does not decrease, does not change over time. Certainly there's an increase. It might change a little bit, it might decrease. But usually we sleep the same amount of time from the time we're maybe young adults from 21 all the way through. The elderly may sleep more during the day and a little bit less at night, but on 24 hours, sleep about the same.
Okay.
If you notice that for some reason you're sleeping more than you used to, or that the same amount of sleep is not as refreshing, there's something wrong with the quality of your sleep, and you've got to start looking at that.
Okay.
The bulk of the people that I see, typically it's a man who comes in saying, nothing's wrong with me, I'm only here because my wife has forced me to come.
Okay.
Because he's been kicked out of the bedroom. And that's the most common scenario that I see at the clinic.
Kicked out of the bedroom because of the snoring?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in terms of snoring, now, is it always caused by sleep apnea, or is it?
No. Snoring can be anything that causes turbulent flow in your throat. So if you've broken your nose, you have deviation of the septum will cause snoring. If you have nasal polyps, if you have cancer in your throat, you could snore. So somebody has to be very cautious about just knee-jerking, saying, hey, first of all, that snoring is normal, or saying that all snoring is from sleep apnea.
Okay. Well, what about weight? What's the connection between weight and snoring?
Okay. About half the people with sleep apnea, and only half of them are overweight. The reason that's occurring is when we gain weight, we put on weight around our necks and our abdomens, different from women who often put on weight on the hips and thighs.
Indeed.
Okay? So when you put on weight around your neck, you accumulate fat on the inside of your neck too. So your throat, the space that it was at before the weight gain, has now gotten smaller, so it's easier to collapse it down. So weight loss is important to improve your snoring. And you only need to lose about 10 or 15% of the weight in order to improve your snoring.
Oh, well, that's encouraging news.
Not
So
really, because
no?
on a long-term basis, you tend to regain the weight back.
Okay. So maybe your family would get brief respites.
Yeah, right. On a
Okay.
short-term basis, it might work. But in the long
Okay.
run, you got to deal with what's causing it to be narrow in the first place.
Okay. Okay, let's take a look at our next question, because this is another disorder that I understand is fairly common. Do your legs kick or bother you through much of the night? What is that? They mentioned something called RLS. What is that?
Yeah, well, the RLS is restless leg syndrome. There's two different things that are very similar. One is called restless leg syndrome. The other one's called periodic limb movements of sleep.
Okay.
Restless legs is an unpleasant, uncomfortable feeling in your legs. It can affect your arms, but mostly in the legs. It can be a tingling or not necessarily painful, but a creepy, crawling feeling that by definition is hard to describe.
Okay.
People often don't know what it is. People say that they feel like pounding a hammer into their nails. It's a creepy feeling.
Ah.
And it goes on whenever the legs are still. Usually it gets worse at night.
Okay.
So everything is fine during the day, and then at night you get this uncomfortable feeling, and the feeling goes away if you move, so you have to get up and walk and pace.
Okay.
And then in the morning it goes away, and then it may come back later around, let's say after lunch. But it always seems to go away in the morning and come back at night.
Okay.
Then there's another condition, which is seems to maybe an extension or maybe a separate disorder with similar features. It's not clear yet, called periodic limb movements, where just the foot and the ankle is moving up. It's just bending the ankle up. And sometimes they kick. And this movement of the foot up and down can make people wake up at night. And they never realize why they did it. They just know that they wake up maybe 15, 20 times a night.
So we call that periodic limb movement.
Yes, and the sign is that the bed sheets will be very disheveled, or your bed partner may be complaining that you're being kicked.
How about that? What about, sometimes I know I have a tendency to, sometimes my legs will kick for no particular reason.
As you're falling asleep, you mean?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, that's typical. You should be happy when that happens.
Oh, okay.
It means that your brain is about to go to sleep.
Okay.
So that's called a hypnic jerk, just a sleep onset jerk. And it can be any part of your body just shrugging. Some people are scared by it. It's very normal. Again, the control of your body asleep is different than it is awake. And think of it as the transition from awake to sleep.
Oh,
Things can
okay.
happen. So also people can start dreaming with their eyes open as they start falling asleep.
How about that? Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that'd be hard to tell whether that's a daydream or whether that's a...
It's usually kind of a head floating or something as you're drifting off.
Ah, okay. Let's take a look at the next question, which I think is really crucial. Do you use alcohol or sleeping pills or other sedating drugs in your bedtime? What about alcohol and drug use, or even alcohol and drug addiction and insomnia?
Well, alcohol is a double-edged sword. The reason people have chronic insomnia, usually it's something triggered, the initial insomnia, then people have developed some maladaptive behaviors that perpetuate the cycle on a long-term basis. And one of the most common things that people do is drink some alcohol. A little bit of alcohol, yes, will make you fall asleep a little bit faster at first. But people who drink alcohol tend to wake up more frequently at night, so the sleep tends not to be refreshing. And over time, the quality of sleep becomes impaired. So we want people not to drink alcohol. And if you snore, if you drink alcohol, it relaxes your muscles even further and makes the sleep apnea worse. So alcohol after dinner is a definite no-no. Same thing with pills. Sleeping pills by themselves, as I mentioned earlier, can cause insomnia. But then we see people who start taking medicine to keep themselves more awake during the day.
Okay.
And start with the caffeine. And we've often seen people come in to the clinic who are addicted to crank-amphetamine,
Right.
who have something called narcolepsy, which is a different disorder.
Tell me about narcolepsy.
Narcolepsy is a disease of the brain. There are 3 states to our existence. You're either dreaming, you're awake, or you're sleeping but you're not dreaming.
Okay.
Okay? And a very primitive part of our brain controls which one of these states you're in, the brainstem. So the mechanism for this is not clear, but there seems to be some kind of gate mechanism that determines which one of these three states you'll be in. In narcolepsy, that gating mechanism is damaged somehow. So people will do awake behaviors while they're sleeping, will do dreaming behaviors while they're awake. So some of the features will be that when you see an narcoleptic during the day, they look very sleepy, but at night they sleep very poorly.
Okay.
One of the things that happens while we're dreaming is that as part of the dream, our bodies become paralyzed. And you can think of dreaming almost as an awake brain in a paralyzed body.
Okay.
If you're ever dreaming that you're running away from somebody or stops
Sure.
from crashing into a wall, there is an active signal from your brain to stop the muscles from moving. And a dreaming person has no reflexes, for example. So as part of narcolepsy, one of the key features is a symptom called cataplexy. And that means that at times of intense emotion, usually with laughter, suddenly your body goes limp on you.
Huh.
People think you fainted. But unlike a faint, you're completely aware of what's going on around you. You just cannot move.
Isn't that interesting? So that's why that's so dangerous when we're behind the wheel of a car
Sure.
or other places. So it isn't just, what's the difference between narcolepsy and people who say, oh, I can just sleep anywhere? You just put me down on a couch in the middle of a party and boom, I'm out.
People are probably very sleep deprived. You can just fall asleep anywhere.
Okay.
That's a different feature.
All right, so that's not necessarily a disorder.
Yeah,
It just means
yeah.
we need to get more rest.
Probably. It means you're sleep deprived.
Okay.
A lot of people are on the go. A good sign that you're sleep deprived is if you need to sleep in on weekends, you're not getting enough sleep during the week, obviously, and you're sleep deprived. And you'd probably be better at your job if you could just get more sleep on a regular basis.
Huh.
Children are thought to be good sleepers, usually between, say, 7 and 9, 7 and 10. Pre-adolescents are the best sleepers. If you have a little kid, you know they don't sleep in on the weekend. They get up at the same
That's
time.
right. They're up. They're ready. So we should ideally be the same way.
That's right.
How about that? So it isn't necessarily a treat to sleep in.
No, it means, well, it's a treat for you, just like if you're very hungry, it's a treat to eat.
Okay.
Okay, it's just in the same way.
Okay. Let's take a look at our last question, which has to do with this, which is, do you have a regular conventional sleep-wake cycle? Now, you were mentioning that people need different types of sleep. I mean, I know some people who say they are fine with 5 hours of sleep. I know other people who need at least 9 or 10. Is that just part of the way we're built, or?
It's not clear. There are people who are long sleepers and people who are short sleepers, but they really seem to be at the tail ends of the spectrum. Most people need about 7 hours of sleep to work at the ideal rate, maybe 8 hours of sleep. But we can get by with less sleep. And again, it's a survival thing. Let's say you're sleeping somewhere when we lived in caves.
Right.
Just because somebody came in to disrupt you, like a bear came in, you would not remain sleeping. You should be able to have the ability to get up if you have to.
Okay.
So if you feel you need to get to work because it's very important what you're doing, yes, you can get by with less sleep.
Okay. So somehow we need to close, but somehow we will do what we need to do to make do.
That's
but
right.
ideally, we need to respect ourselves and get enough rest.
That's right.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Do join us next week as we look at the consequences of mother loss on young daughters. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.